Hi, I'm Rich Wynn.
And I'm Rebecca Nixon, and this is the PropTech Growth Podcast.
Every episode, we interview an expert in the PropTech startup space, gathering their advice and expertise to help you run a successful PropTech business.
I'm the Portable PropTech CMO, and I help PropTech startups build and scale their commercial growth strategy.
I'm Rich from Rich Wynn Consultancy. I specialise in operations, sales and process, helping fintechs and PropTech companies to grow.
But before this, I was looking at starting something up like a year and a half ago, and I sort of spoke to like business coaches and ended up working with one who was, quite good, and the idea that I had was pretty pants. So, they did what they could with it, but they sort of, said that this is how we would do it, and I was like, okay, well, that's the one-page marketing plan. I've read that book. Why would I pay you $2,000 to, sort something out on a Trello board for me?
Right.
When I can just do that myself on a sheet of paper that I print off. And I say that there is more to her than that. But when I heard, I was just like, that's like, for what you charge and the amount of customers that you have, that's like, maybe I should start doing something like that, because it's obviously works, and if you find the right book that works for you, then go for it. And
we all, I'm writing my own framework from scratch like an idiot.
Yeah, well, exactly, and that's what I've been doing and looking at as well, like, especially around the sales and marketing process. Like, I just think there must be something out there that works, especially when you look at B2B SaaS, and we sort of discussed this last week, and I put that on a post, and I think it was Rajiv Nayar again, who, when we did the podcast with him, was like, it's, everyone knows the B2B SaaS model, but it's that nuance on top of industry that sometimes people don't sort of think about. But it's interesting how different people work, and as much as mentors and business coaches and people like that are good, if you find the right one, there are a lot of shysters or equivalents out there, and it is, you have to sort of work your way through it, as I guess you do with contractors and people like ourselves. You need to find the right fit of people to work with. So yeah, that's where I'm at. But yeah, really interesting book so far, and I'm again, with audio, I find it so much easier to listen than read. I couldn't find the time to read like that book, but listening to it I find much easier, the same way I find video easier.
Yeah, it's different for everyone. I mean, I think depending on the context, I find reading a book easier for some things, and listening for others. Love an audiobook, love a podcast. It's just such a good way to, especially if you're doing something mindless, like you're cooking or cleaning or driving or going for a walk. It's nice to have that format.
I think that walking and running are the two things that I probably do, and I don't, when I run, I can't really listen to anything, but when I'm just walking somewhere, like I went for a walk to get a coffee this morning, you just have it in, and it goes into your subconscious, even if you're not really listening, because you're dozy like me, and you're just staring around and walking into traffic the wrong way because you're not really with it that early in the morning. So I think it went out about 6, but it's nice up north, so I didn't mind that. Yeah.
Well, at least some of it gets into your subconscious for sure, even if you're not fully paying attention. You can listen to it like 5 times, and then the top stuff will eventually float up, and you'll be like, oh
yeah. But it's like, if I read on my Kindle, like, I highlight the bits that are really important, or that I think are really important, but then I never go back and actually look at them. I've just highlighted them, and then like, oh, I've read that book now. I sort of like, I've written down a couple of things, which again, I'll never go back and look at. But you sort of, it's one of those, it is definitely repetition, and that's why people revise for exams and stuff like that. But speaking of podcasts, that our T-Life Adam Piggott podcast has been our most successful yet. It's already overtaken Steve Rad, which I thought would take some doing, but there's been massive interest in that. So hopefully, yeah, that really takes off, and it will all be because of us and our podcasts rather than the product itself, which is a fantastic product, but it is not as fantastic as our podcast. I think everybody would agree.
We won't edit that out. That's great.
No, I don't think we should. But yeah, what have you been up to anyway?
Taking my own advice, which is like always my update, right? It's like, hang on a minute, what do I always tell people they need to do? And what I've been working on has been getting really clear on my value proposition. So the different areas within a business and the marketing function, which is very broad, breaking that down into the value that I add to each of those areas and the journey that I take each of my clients on, broken down into their customer relationship, their branding, their offering, their messaging, and then ongoing coaching and support after that, and breaking it down into quite a detailed set of deliverables and a methodology to take people through. And I think I've been resistant to that because, not because PropTech businesses are super unique, but because PropTech founders tend to feel that their businesses are so unique that any sort of standardized framework won't apply to them. And I think that that's a misconception. And I think a lot of very experienced founders who we've spoken to have said that that's a misconception. There are standardized ways of doing things that are best practice for a reason. And the reason you get an expert in to do what they do is because they have that experience. If that experience wasn't applicable to you, it wouldn't matter if you got an expert in to do it or not, right? So opening up the sort of mysterious black hole of what it means to have a CMO and what that person delivers has been an interesting journey for me, particularly because a lot of the time I do run on instinct, because I meet a founder and all of that experience is just sort of rattling around in the back of my head. I'm not specifically thinking through things that I've done before, but because I've done so much of this stuff before, I'm speaking to someone and I'm going, okay, I'm already pulling at threads, knowing the direction that you need to take and what we need to do. And so it's almost as if I just want to get in there and start getting stuff done and ticking stuff off the to-do list. But again, taking my own advice, what I always tell people is get the strategy right first, get the fundamentals right first. So with that in mind, I'm trying to get really, really clear on the process that these businesses need to go through and how I take them through that and how they can manage that internally as well.
Yeah. And I mean, we discussed this last week, didn't we? And again, I've taken some of your advice and again, the sort of value proposition that I offer, sometimes it can be hard, unless you speak to me, it's hard to understand, because I was so exceptional at mortgage sales and you know, everything around that, and even in Dubai commercial real estate I was pretty fantastic at, obviously being really humble. And you know, I think getting that across is something that I really need to work on. And I think as a you know, a contractor or freelancer, you know, I think until you've got 3 or 4 steady clients, you still have to refer to yourself as a sort of freelancer, you know, as much as it sort of, you know, I want it to be a business, you know, I'm there or thereabouts. But yeah, I think people who know me and you know, who've worked with me before, or you know, people who took a chance, such as obviously Inventory Base, my favorite company, although I am completely unbiased, but they're the best inventory provider. You know, and what I brought to them in the sales process, and you know, even from my old company TNHG, what I implemented there. You know, you talk about case studies. You know, it would be you know, something pretty magnificent that I can sort of talk through on there. But you're definitely right, and I think what a massive benefit of you is obviously, I mean, look, marketing is pretty easy. but getting it right is not easy, because you need that full buy-in. And again, we were discussing that last week. If that company or that founder or whoever doesn't have full buy-in and isn't willing to take the time, in the same way, if they're not fully bought into hiring their first salesperson, or they don't have the time to do it, and they just say, look, let's just hire 5 freelance and hope for the best, sort of thing, it's just not going to work out. You have to make the time to do it, otherwise it's just not going to work. In the same way, I was thinking about this, I spoke to about 10 different founders over the past 4 weeks and said to them, what is your sales process? 2 out of the 10 could tell me in detail what the sales process were.
Wow.
And those 2, unsurprisingly, were probably the most successful with regards to, you know, that consistency of MRR. You know, there's obviously different measures of success, but you know, to not know your sales process, you don't need to know everything as a founder, but how would you not know what your salespeople are doing? How can you actually get decent information and data that you can then work from without knowing exactly what your sales process is? And it's, you know, one of those things that's so important and is easy overlooked, because again, I from when I had Hooched, I lived on data. Like, obviously I was selling as well, and I knew the sales process because it was my process, because it's, you know, mortgage is fairly prescriptive, but because it's online, like online broker, we had to change sort of how we did it. But again, because I was selling it, I knew the process. I could teach people the process, coach people on the process, because it is, you know, like I say, quite prescriptive. But there's no reason why you can't have a prescriptive sales process. There aren't that many sales processes out there for inbound or outbound calling, like, which is ultimately what these guides do. Obviously, relationship building, BDMs, is slightly different. But again, there's still a process there, and they will still be making outbound calls and inbound calls, and we just need to make sure that consistency is there across. Otherwise, your data isn't going to be consistent. And so how can you properly run a sales team, whether you've got a sales manager or you're doing it yourself, or whether you've got 1 salesperson or 10 salespeople? It does make a huge difference. And I'm not saying that I'm the answer to that. You know, you could read a book and go with a sales process from there. There are great books out there to do that. But I would say, you know, that is one of the key things that you need to focus on if you're not at the moment, to at least know what it is, even if it's bit part. You know, we just look for people on LinkedIn, approach them, do whatever. I think that's what we do, like, which is one of the answers that I got. Like, I'm just like, okay, you know, but you can still make that into a process. Like, it doesn't have to be ad hoc. So yeah, but something that made me, I know I'm sort of talking more than you, but it's just sort of that job that I told you about last week, which was just so atypical of people looking for marketing. So it was a head of marketing job for a law firm, completely irrelevant, but it was for a law firm, and they wanted a marketing person who would work with the sales team to help market the sales side of things. But also,
let's go through each item one, but this will be fun. Okay, you go through each item, and I'll start the salary and bump it up for each added function.
Okay.
So you want, starting with a salesperson who's a marketing person who's going to work with the sales team on marketing the product or the service,
marketing
right?
Service, yeah.
Okay, so we're now at 35 grand.
Yeah, but they also wanted someone with and they had to have 2 years experience in marketing with sales.
40 grand.
And they then wanted somebody for the same role, head of marketing, someone who could work with HR in that recruitment, basically.
48 grand.
And then they wanted 2 years experience in that as well.
53 grand.
They also wanted, for some unknown reason that I've never understood, that they wanted someone with a bachelor's degree in marketing.
57 grand.
And what else? There's something else that was completely ridiculous. Oh yeah, they wouldn't report into the head of sales or the someone higher up, they would report in to the sales team to tell the
I'm
sales.
not adding anything to that, but oh my God.
No, but just out of pure ridiculousness, and it's a cut and paste job from obviously marketing. That was the head of marketing.
And then they offering 57 to 65 grand.
40 grand, no bonus, base
No.
salary.
I mean, you couldn't even hire a 3-day-a-week content writer for that.
Just absolutely bizarre. And I think,
what do they think people's rent is? What? Let's all just live in vans.
the thing is, I don't even know where they were based, but even Midlands up north, on one person on 40 grand, if you're head of marketing,
No.
is such a low salary.
Mm-hmm.
And to do everything that they were asking, which seemed like quite a lot, it just didn't make sense. You would need to add at least one other person to the team,
mm-hmm.
to the marketing team, in order to get that, because they were a relatively big solicitors firm. I don't know, maybe they were conveyancing, I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just made me laugh. One of the first things that when we met, when you were sort of describing what a portable CMO was, and then I think even in one of the podcasts when we were talking about it, and you pretty much described that advert. I think when we were talking to Jimmy Armitage, and he was going through the recruitment side of things,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, people just say these things and then put in 40 grand, and when you actually speak to them and realize like it's actually like you need to be paying 60 to 80 or whatever, they're just like clueless. But it was so specific.
So weird. Yeah, I saw one the other day that I think they were offering about 30 grand, and just the list of requirements. It was like they'd gone around the business and asked everyone, what do you just not want to do or don't know how to do? And that's marketing now. Seriously?
Yeah.
It's like, I think it speaks to a historical issue with the value of marketing, which is understandable, right? When you build an entire set of roles around this idea of making things look pretty, then once that doesn't offer enough value, you try and add a whole bunch of extra functions in to make it add value. But actually the issue is failing to understand, and as marketers we do this ourselves, it's a real issue in the marketing industry, we're getting better at it, but delivering scalable business solutions is what a good marketing function will do. And it's about going from, you know, we've got a few salespeople who are talking to individuals on a one-to-one basis, telling them the benefits of our product and getting them to buy it, to we have a publicly available presence that draws people in to engage with us. And that includes making it look pretty, because if it looks like crap, no one will trust you or think that you're professional. But that's not why. That the visual appeal isn't the end game. The visual appeal is just one step along the way when it comes to building a scalable business.
I think that's interesting. I think a lot of companies, and even myself, when I set up the digital marketing department at my old employer, you know, they want to see a return on their investment as such. And I think marketing, some people don't understand that marketing is sales. It runs very closely with that. And if you just want someone to make some stuff look pretty and put out some all right copy and stuff like that, that's not really marketing. That's just an admin doing a role that could be perceived as marketing. Marketing is to bring in business that will help the sales team, you know, with value. And I think between sales and marketing, obviously depending on who you are and the skill set that you have, you know, building that UX is so important now. And it has to, you know, you have to work closely with sales in order to do that. But you need somebody like yourself who understands that concept and can make that work. Because, you know, if you can't, you are pretty much wasting your money on marketing, which is why paying someone 40 grand to do what they've just asked is just a complete waste of money, because you're not going to get somebody who understands that sales, it's sales and marketing is basically the same thing. You just sort of, you don't hire a sales marketing person, you hire a marketing or a salesperson.
The only difference between sales and marketing is that sales is one-to-one and marketing is one-to-many. That's it. Everything else is the same. So, marketing sits higher up in the funnel as a general rule because it's one-to-many, and sales is lower down because it's one-to-one, and you've got this funnel going down. But the overlap in the middle is significant.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting. I mean, when I was in sales, just looking back, I never really saw the value of marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I was so, like you say, I was so focused on what was in front of me. The one, obviously, as you get older, you appreciate how much you actually have to spend on marketing. If you go like down the Google route or any sort of ads, paid ads, SEO, whatever, you know that, and I'm not going to call it a necessary evil, but in a lot of cases, it is a necessary evil. If you start from scratch, you either need to get some lists from somewhere, which is pretty hard and pretty expensive, or you go onto Google and waste a load of money while you work out how it actually works, and you pay these shoddy companies and they just rip you off like you're $5,000 down before you've even started. I'm sure there are some great companies out there, and I do know some really good companies. I'm not having a go at SEO and Google Ads companies, but to find a good one who is an expert in your sector is very difficult. And again, I think that's where somebody like you comes in with regards to, you can probably recommend someone or at least guide someone within that the Google Ads type area, because that's almost a full-time job as well. I know, as I did it, and again, it's the data that's so important. Someone has to mine that data and then report back to the necessaries. Does a founder have time to do that as well as everything else they're trying to do?
They really, really don't. And so what it ends up becoming is an ad hoc admin job for them, which they can't focus on because how could they? And even when we talk about marketing, B2B SaaS marketing is niche, and Google Ads are designed for mass engagement. So you're already on the back foot. So if you want meaningful engagement with your audience, you need to know how to build that into your advertising strategy. And in fact, I very rarely, on a more tactical note, I very rarely recommend people use Google Ads for quite some time, because I'm always telling them, let's run some LinkedIn ads first. LinkedIn cost per click is a lot higher, but the results you're going to get are going to be so much more meaningful because the audience is a professional audience that you've targeted based on what they do, what their job title is, even their email address, if you can get it. And so you're going with this really targeted audience that you know is made up of the people you're trying to reach. Whereas with Google Ads, it's a bit of spray and pray, because you're putting stuff out there hoping that the people who are searching for the terms you're targeting are the ones you're trying to reach. So you're already at a disadvantage there. So to test messaging and find out what actually engages with people, B2B is a really, really different space than generic marketing. I've seen at least 3 B2B SaaS PropTech startups in the last 6 months hiring B2C marketing managers and then wondering why they fall flat on their face. It's crazy.
That's really interesting. It's not LinkedIn ads as the best option for B2B. It's actually really like straightforward. But I would never think to say that first. I would always think Google Ads, and so that's a learn for me. That, I mean, obviously I know about building up presence and all that sort of stuff on LinkedIn, but actual ads, I don't know if I see any ads on LinkedIn or if I just assume it's just part of the feed or what. But yeah,
part of the reason they're so good is because it's so curated. So any ads you're getting on LinkedIn are usually carefully targeted and thought about and written by people who know what they're doing and are trying to add value. So I would recommend next time you're on LinkedIn, have a little look out for some ads, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I am not a big fan of advertising in general. Marketing and advertising are not the same thing. And marketing and brand are not the same thing. They have overlapping touch points. But when it comes to advertising as an industry, I tend to keep it at arm's length for all of the reasons that all of our listeners will be very au fait with. But on a professional platform, it's kind of a different story. And I think most people who are on LinkedIn, like you say, are actually not even noticing whether or not what they're seeing is sponsored content or whether it's just part of their feed.
That's interesting. I mean, so advertising, I guess, for me, if you need to move quickly and you need to get customers, which everybody does, for me, marketing's more of a longer game, I guess. Because if you don't advertise, how are you going to get people to your website, or how are you going to get people to know about you? I know with marketing, like for me, it's always just been a longer game, which is why the adverts, when you only have X amount and you have a runway of 6 months or whatever, you need to get someone in ASAP. So can you explain that?
Sure. So sometimes advertising isn't the quickest way. Because as I explained, the difference between, say, Google Ads, which is mass marketing to as many people as possible in the hope that they'll respond to you, which can be a money pit. Then you have LinkedIn ads, which is very, very targeted. One of the first things, and this is very generic advice, so take it with a pinch of salt, but one of the first things a B2B SaaS company needs to do is test messaging, because you can't assume that what you're saying is necessarily going to engage with the people you're trying to reach. As a B2B SaaS company, presumably you have either a few customers already, or you have some people who are probably going to be customers or on like a free trial, like people you've started engaging with before you got funding, who you may have met through your black book or your investors. And there's a few people who see the value in your product and are either paying for it or willing to pay for it. Having conversations with those people about the value that they're getting from your product, crafting that into some messaging that will engage with other people who are like them. So that's around your value proposition, but it's also around the day-to-day challenges that those people are facing and how you might be able to help, just with advice in general or insights or reports or articles, whatever. And so building out a set of messages and putting those in front of, say, your existing customers and saying, hey, what if this, excuse my dog, it's nap time. What if this lands with you the most? Put it in order of 1 to 10, right? Then you have a bunch of messages to test with the market, but you want to test it with the people who you're trying to reach. You don't want to test it with everyone. That's where something as simple as list building can come into play. So buying a list online is fraught with all sorts of issues, but you can hire someone on Fiverr and go, here's an online list from an online directory of however many companies that I am trying to target with my services. I'm looking for someone with this job title, this sort of location. You give them as much information as you can, like demographic, database information that you can give them, and ask them to go away and build a contact list for you. Try and get a couple of thousand people on it. Then you run that contact list through a list cleaning service, because there's going to be a lot of junk in there and you don't want to damage your sender reputation. Then you use a low-cost email marketing tool, like ActiveCampaign is one I often use for testing messaging. And then you break those lists up and you send them each out a series of messages, email messages, with subject lines that relate to the messaging you're trying to test, and content that does the same thing, and just try a bunch of different stuff. And you'll be amazed at what you will learn from the open rates and click-through rates of those emails. Once you know from those sort of mass experiments of hundreds or even 1,000, a couple thousand people, then you know what content to put in your targeted LinkedIn advertising, because you're only going to pay to put stuff in front of people that you know they're interested in and engaged with. And that's when you do your things like your audience expansion, where you let the LinkedIn algorithm target a broader range of people who are similar to the ones you already have contact details for. Does that make sense?
That's really interesting. And I think that's a great example, slash, if someone's not sure how you may start with them or what some of your ideas are or whatever, that's actually very I could do that. Obviously I'd have to like rewind and take the bits in. Obviously I do some stuff with this, but that is very clear, and you could probably do that in a couple of weeks, and the amount of money that you'd save basically if you just go out there and stick some stuff on Google or LinkedIn or whatever, that would be well worth it, and I don't think you'd lose time to do that. So that's really, really interesting.
On average, it takes a couple of months usually for me to turn this around with a client, but that's because you have back and forth with different people, different stakeholders, internally and externally. That tends to be the longest wait times in building this stuff out. And then, of course, you need to go into a platform and actually build your stuff. But, even then, it's a few months at me doing, say, 1 day a week with them. If I did an intensive couple of weeks, we could turn it around really quickly. That's just an example of the kind of thing that I will often recommend as, it is sort of a generic solution, but if it's done right with somebody who knows how to do it, then it can be incredibly effective. And you can save a year's worth of runway where you've hired someone to come in and do advertising, and they're just like, okay, well, what ads should I write? And then you go, well, I don't know. That's why I hired you. And they're like, yeah, but I don't know what your customers want. Tell me about them. And so then you have this like having to draw as much value as you can out of this person and spend so much time with them. Whereas if you spend just a little bit of time talking to your customers and talking to an expert, you can bring those two things together and boom, results.
Yeah. And that's where I guess value for money comes in as well. When we go back to that 40 grand job, you're not going to get the best person in the world doing that. Whereas if you paid a bit more, even just have you once a week or whatever, you would quite quickly see the value in that as well. And I think that you've made a really good case as to why you would be a viable hire. I wouldn't hire you because your hair's a mess. I think it's always like
I've been out in the wind. That's why.
Because I don't have that problem. Apart from I go to the barbers and say, leave the top, just do the sides.
Do you get a discount for that?
I just shave it myself. I think the last time I went to a barber's in Dubai just to get like the full like flannel and all the experience, but I had quite a bushy beard then, so they sorted that out for me. But
my partner's hair is longer than mine, and so he's got really, really long hair and a big beard, and it's got to the point now where it gets so tangled and annoying that he's like, I'm just gonna shave it all off. Like, darling, just take a breath. You could just get a haircut. That's an option. I'm gonna shave it off. One extreme to the other.
Haven't you got some sheep shears or something like that, where you just like take 2 or 3 inches off the bottom?
What do you call it here? A whippersnipper. You call it a strimmer. You get the strimmer out.
A whippersnipper. Is that an Australian thing?
I think so, yeah.
That's amazing. A whippersnipper.
Well, we've talked a lot about how I would approach that sort of situation with a business. What about you? Because I know that you touched on a bit with the sales process issue that you come up against with a lot of these businesses. Again, is this just a matter of knowing best practice and how to implement it, or is there more to it than that?
I think it depends how much you want to go into it. I mean, I'm very process driven in what I do. So, you know, it's not just sales process. If you don't know your sales process, you probably don't have written down anywhere what any of your processes are. Be that, you know, hiring, be that, you know, whatever, how to use your CRM, you know, all that sort of stuff. I would suggest, and one of the first things that I do and have done with companies recently is I will go in and we will look at your like up to 15 processes, depending on how old the company is or you know how advanced they are, and I will get them to write them down and we'll discuss them. And from that, it's then I just say, look, put it on an Excel, stick it somewhere. Then you've got that information. You know your core processes. When you hire somebody, which the hiring process would be in there, you can then say to them, these are our processes. This is how we work. If you're looking at very basic, you haven't got like a sales manager to coach the salesperson, or, you know, you've just got one salesperson in and they're just doing whatever. You get your processes down, and then obviously you can change them, and you don't want every single process, but I'd say between 10 and 15. And from that, and then from the discussions around the process with one company who were really struggling and were like, well, you know, we've got no leads coming in or anything like that. We found that through discussing it, well, actually, oh yeah, there's a lead source. Oh yeah, you know, why haven't we contacted these people? And it just sort of something as simple as that. And we did it in 6 hours. It was a one-off day, and the value that they got out of that then became so big that, you know, they've hired 2 more salespeople and follow the process and things like that. And, you know, obviously that's one company. I've done it with 2 or 3, and we're seeing real sort of good stuff coming from them. Because obviously you keep in touch, and it's not just a one-off; it is an ongoing thing. But to really get into the sort of the process side of things, that is, you know, what you should do. And arguably, you don't need me to do that. You could go off and do it yourself. But, you know, do you have the time? Are you going to concentrate on it? Are you actually going to give yourself, you know, that day to do it when, you know, we were like, okay, phones off, emails off, whatever. You know,
gosh, that's so true.
And yeah, it just seems to work really well. So, and that's just the start of it. There's then quite a good process that follows that on. And my thing with process, it's never just find out. It's always solution led. So it's not tell us what's wrong from that process. It's okay, how can we make that right? And then we can then start to make it right. And obviously some of you've got your proven techniques, but some of it is trial and error, in the same way it is with, you know, marketing and advertising and everything really when you're working on it. But quite quickly, because you have those processes written down, you can find the right process and then just follow it. And then that just helps. And obviously the bigger your company gets, it doesn't mean you have to put every process down, but you can get to the point where someone is actually making sure these processes are followed. And that is because I said mortgages were so prescriptive, and you're authorized by the FCA and all that sort of stuff. You have to do certain things, and there are certain compliance things, but so it's all sort of set out. But, you know, there aren't many financial services firms that are doing badly. Like obviously with the mortgage rate rises, people still need to remortgage. Going on to a 5% 5-year fixed is better than going on to the SVR of 8% or whatever. So you still have to do that, and it's a prescribed sales process. So, you know, everyone knows that, and it's prescribed accordingly. So there's no reason why you can't do that in property or in obviously fintech and PropTech and everything else. I think it works across the board. It just so happens that I'm working in the property and finance sort of sectors. But yeah, I find it really interesting. Loads of people probably find it boring, but it makes such a difference. Just that one-off day, or you know, then, you know, I follow up and speak to these clients, and, you know, it's about that value proposition and just sort of making the client aware of that at the start. But yeah, that's been really successful for me. And yeah, I definitely recommend it to anybody. Like I say, even if you don't use me, just have a look at your processes. And even if they're the wrong process, that doesn't matter. Have a look at then how you can fix it, or how you can make it different, or try something different, because it does work. The company evolves, you evolve, processes evolve. If you're not on top of it, you'll then go to try and scale, and they'll say, okay, £1 million, what for? Don't know, just
yeah, and then they'll go to scale, and then they'll go, yeah, but what are you going to do with it to scale? Oh,
yeah.
That's why I need your money. No, so you just end up in this feedback loop. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting the way that you sort of talk about the coaching side of it, because actually, while you do humbly say, well, you know, anyone can look at their processes, you get very blinkered in your own business, and you don't know what the inside of other people's businesses look like, or what best practice necessarily looks like. So you can look at your own processes, but you'll be doing that in a completely different context. You'll be doing that in the context of someone who only has those to look at and is perhaps a little too close to them and too familiar with them. If you have someone external who has that experience, who you can trust to come in, help you prioritize, help you stay on track and know what your KPIs are, and set really clear deliverables around improving things, then that's going to make that work so much more meaningful. And it's going to be done in the context of other businesses as well who are comparable to yours, and ensure that best practice is adhered to. Otherwise, it's a bit like me trying to fix the ride-on lawnmower. I've never fixed a ride-on lawnmower before. I'm smart and capable, so I could hop on YouTube and try and find some videos to fix it. But I'd be a lot smarter to just get someone in who has fixed 100 other ride-on lawnmowers and can look at it and go, oh yeah, there's your problem. And that's what you do.
Yeah. I think you've just sold me better than I can sell me. Maybe I ought to hire you for a bit. Free of charge, obviously, but yeah,
gratis.
But I think earlier I did say marketing is easy, so you know, maybe I need to retract that comment. I'm pretty sure I say that on every podcast, so yeah, I will retract it in this instance.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I always end up, weirdly, even though I work in marketing, I always end up talking to founders about their onboarding process. That always just seems to be such a sticking point in SaaS. Have you found that as well, or is that just me?
Yeah, I think for me it comes back down to process. It's boring that I keep saying it, but it is. If you don't have a prescribed process, if you are right, we are going to look on LinkedIn. Okay, we're going to look for people who are consistent top performers. We're going to, look at people we're not interested in people who've been there 1 or 2 years, because they're obviously not a top performer, right? And that you can look at the company. People who've been there 3, 4, 5 years, I'm probably going to look at those sort of people in sales, for example, because they're obviously very good at what they do because they've stayed at that company for that period of time. And then when I if I get to speak to them, I can then have a look at the people that they know and see if there's anyone that's comparable to them. And so, and then sort of go out from there. Then you hire someone and say, not do you know anybody, but are there people that you worked with before? Like maybe we need a salesman. Is anyone you worked before who might fit in that? And I think as long as you prescribe, rather than just saying we're going to look through LinkedIn or we're going to use Sales Navigator to try and find somebody, if you have a prescribed process, and again, you can find this anywhere, like in books and all that sort of stuff. As long as you have a process and stick to it, then if it doesn't work out, you probably need to look at another process next time. So I think, yeah, as long as you do something, but write down what you're doing or structure what you're doing before you do it, then it's a lot easier. And I was looking at it today, and one of the guy who used to work for me at Hooched, he went to Trussell and became a manager there, and then decided he preferred to broke. So he's just gone out by himself doing mortgages. But he was my third hire. We paid him the most by far because I could see that continued track record of success, and I knew he was really, really good. And he came on board, and he was absolutely fantastic. So I can't actually remember how we found him. But had I had a process, I could have found, people similar to him, or he could have brought somebody across. but because I was, again, there's so much going on, and you're just happy that you found one person who's good, because it is hard, especially as to get them to come to a startup when they were getting offers from other places, which is why we ended up paying them more than we probably wanted to, but it was worth it in the long run. And again, you pay for quality, as I've found out over the years. So yeah, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Well, funnily enough, I think it just comes down to scalability. So actually what I meant when I was talking about onboarding was customer onboarding, and I should have specified.
Oh, right, sorry.
No, it's fine. That was me not communicating clearly. I
thought that's what you were meant to do in marketing. I thought that was like the key.
I know. Who knew that I had communication issues? Maybe that's why I went into marketing.
Or maybe I just wanted to talk about process again.
Maybe. But it is a process. Onboarding customers is a process.
Yeah, it is.
Often it's not standardized. And so you end up with these startups who are like, oh yeah, we've got 10 clients. They're all great. Okay, how much did it cost you to get each of those clients on board? And their CAC is so high. And it's because they don't have a really robust onboarding process. And one of the startups I worked with, they had so many people interested in their product, but no efficient way of onboarding them and getting them live on the platform. It's just a manual process every single time. And it had to be IT that were doing it. And I was like, how many pieces of information do you actually need from a customer to get them live on the platform? Turned out it was about half a dozen. And I was like, hang on a minute. Can't you build an online form and get them just to sign up on the website, fill out this form that goes into your onboarding system, and then they've got a login emails to them, like when you sign up for pretty much anything online. And they're like, oh, I don't know if we want to do that. We want to really, we want to really hold the customer's hand and give them a bespoke white glove experience. I was like, right, but how many white gloves do you have on your team? Because you're talking about increasing your customers from 10 to 500 within the space of a couple of years. How are you going to make that happen? The last customer you onboarded took them 3 months to get on board. You don't have that kind of time. And it sounds to me like actually they don't need that white glove experience to be onboarded. And what you probably need to do is to have some just really good quality engagement with them, some automated emails that tell them how to use the platform, some videos that show them how to set their account up. Once we did that, we had people signing up through the website. Click of a button, pick your plan, fill in your details, and the MRR went from, I think it was about $2,000 to 10 times that within the space of about 6 months. All because they stopped feeling special and were like, oh, okay, we can just make this a process, standardize it, make it simple, get the customer to do it. It takes them 5 minutes. Sorted.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm thinking of a particular company, and I won't name them, but they had that process down to an absolute T. And recently they've, in order to increase, have started sort of sending out videos with that, so they don't have to ring up every single customer who signs up and say that. And actually what they're doing now, which is increases value, because they, the customer signs up, they send out these how to use videos in a sort of set pattern or whatever. And now when they're ringing them up to upsell rather than ringing them up to get them on board. And obviously they'll field on board questions, and they have a very good admin team who who help with any sort of quick generic stuff. But they're freeing up their proper salespeople to sell, to upsell, to make the company more money. And yes, that's been a process over a couple of years to get to that point. But now they're seeing their profit just rise so much quicker than it had before. It's very steady and increasing each year at X amount, very similar amount. And now it's just, even after a few months of doing it, it's made such a massive difference. And again, that process is so set and it will be written down. And this is the process that we're now going to follow. So the salespeople understand it. Who've, you know, 2 of the salespeople have been there for 3, 4, 5 years. They're you know, not set in their ways, because you have to be adaptable and involved with the company, but they understand now what their job is. And obviously the questions at the start, and again, it comes back to the sort of coaching and then making sure everyone understands everything. But this process is written down in a folder. So if your boss isn't there or you can't get in touch with anybody, you can go and look at that folder, and that is what you do. Like, if you starts, this is how we do it. Like, and then they're there from the start. They're not picking up bad habits from someone who's been there 4 or 5 years. This is the process. Follow it. Obviously, make it your own, but don't waste your time ringing everybody. Like, look at, okay, you've gone for the 0 package or whatever, which gives you very little. But let's get you on £10 to £25 a month. Let's see if we can get the rest of your office on it, because it's per user or whatever. And then suddenly it's just So I think, again, it's massive, and it all comes back down to process. And there are only so many ways that you can do that. You don't need, as a founder, a startup. I know we've concentrated mainly on startups here, but that's sort of who I guess me and you deal with more than anyone, certainly myself. You know, don't reinvent the wheel. You don't need to. There's simple process out there. Follow that. If it doesn't work, try another one, you know, or try harder.
Yeah, otherwise you're just setting yourself up for a scalability bottleneck, and that doesn't look good to investors.
Yeah, 100%.
Thanks for joining us on the PropTech Growth Podcast. To learn more, you can find us on LinkedIn or email proptechpodcast@icloud.com. See you next time.